besides like the personality, I don't really fit in a lot of boxes for some of the viewers I watch WrestleTalk. So it's one of them ones where don't be a rehash of someone else. Be yourself because that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you different, and that's what sells you to the people.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Fresh, and stand back with another video. This time, I'm joined once again by Sati Niangi from WrestleTalk to talk about how he began working for WrestleTalk. So, welcome back on the show.
What's up, Tom? We haven't talked. What has it been like? Nearly like a couple of years or a year,
2021,
and it's now 2023. And I remember you did when you DM me, you're like, "Oh, should we do another interview?" And I said, "Interview me like probably in a year's time. I probably have more to say."
I remember that now. And then
Mm.
now, you do have more to say, so that's really cool. But if we take this
Yeah.
back to the beginning,
Mm.
before you started working for WrestleTalk, how big of a fan of their content were you?
So I discovered Wrestle Talk when he used to be on Challenge. You know, back in the days when TNA used to have a
Yeah, yeah.
show on. I want to say Sundays, and afterwards you had Joe Ross, Francesco Wood, Patrick Lennon. Those were the days that when I was watching, and then when they had the rotating presenters after Joe Ross left, I've been watching it from that time. So I've been a huge fan of the Wrestle Talk show, and then when Ollie took over the YouTube channel, I was a huge fan of that. I was a huge fan of Quirky Ollie's delivery of doing the news and so forth.
Mhm. So then, when it comes to being a fan, is there anything you picked up on when you started presenting for them that you're like, I do something similar to how so and so might do this?
So for me, before I joined them, because they used to do things where they do challenges or if people get punished. Because the thing that drew me to Wrestle Talk was their sense of humor.
Mm.
It was the fact I felt like I could fit in with their style of humor of what they were going for in terms of their content and everything like that. So I was like, yeah, I can definitely see myself fitting in with that group. So that's what made me want to do it. I'll see them do like the singing thing. For example, Ollie did like his version of our truth theme.
Yeah.
Pete did I'm an ass man. That's an example. And then Andy Datson did Holla by the Bella Twins. It shows you that Wrestle Talk they got a great sense of humor.
Mm. So you talked about sense of humor being a great asset to both you and Wrestle Talk. How do you use your sense of humor in your presenting currently?
So the way I explain to people is how I am on Wrestle Talk is how I am in real life in terms of how I act. If obviously there's times when people have down periods when they're not always hyperactive. But it's like when I enjoy something, I enjoy talking about something or I enjoy someone's company, I am 100% always 100, like my energy level is always like that. For me, it's being your authentic self. If that's an advice I can give to anyone, just be your most authentic self. Don't try to fit into a box. For example, I don't really, besides like the personality, I don't really fit in a lot of boxes for some of the viewers I watch Wrestle Talk. So it's one of them ones where don't be a rehash of someone else. Be yourself because that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you different, and that's what sells you to the people.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree with all that advice, to be honest. So when
Thank
it
you.
comes to being your authentic self, and you talked about the person you are on camera is basically the person you are off camera. Do you
Yeah.
have to do anything to get into, okay, I'm going to be in presenter mode now, if basically the two are carbon copies of each other?
So in terms of presenter mode, I'll use this as an example. So when I do the news, when I'm a host in the news, I have a writer that writes my material because initially when I auditioned to do, well, actually we'll get to that. I shouldn't spill the beans. You say presenting, so I'll stick with podcasting. So we review SmackDown, right? So when I watch SmackDown, I write notes. That's what helps me. Notes, because sometimes you don't want to waffle. You want to be more concise in terms of what you're talking about. So doing notes, at least I know, okay, I enjoy this match, what I enjoyed about this match, or I enjoy this promo, what I liked about this promo. If I didn't like a match, so I have points to point out. So in terms of being presenter mode, I always think about how how to properly convey what I'm trying to say in terms of the show that I'm reviewing.
I understand completely. What about coming out of presenter mode? How do you have to do anything to become Sati Nyangi, the civilian, for lack of a better word?
When the camera turns off, I'm just is again when the camera turns off, I'm just still the same guy. That's the best way to describe it. I'm just me, you know. Because what happened is, as soon as we finish podcasting, it's time for me to go home. So I just say bye to Tempest, who's my current co-host, and I pack my bags and I go home and spend time with my family. So that's how I basically go back to being myself. Like as soon as I leave that office, Sat Inyangi the civilian comes out.
Mm. You talked about Tempest, but before we get into him, how
Mm.
did you first get the offer to start doing the weekends for WrestleTalk?
Good question. So Pete Quinnell, the great Pete Quinnell, he basically, since he joined WrestleTalk, he's been relegated to Saturdays for quite a while. And as you know, Saturday is quite a sociable day. And he basically got tired of doing Saturdays, paid his dues. He wants to do more regular Monday to Friday, wherever. So there was a spot opening up for Saturdays. And I initially, as you know, was covering Saturdays sometimes. When I was doing NXT in the beginning, and that kind of ended, and they still wanted to work with me, so I was like a cover presenter for their Saturday shows. So yeah, Pete got tired of doing Saturdays. That's the truth, and he wanted to do more regular hours. I got offered it. I initially was a bit hesitant to do the Saturday shows because at the time it was like a full work hour because I was getting for like 10 and I didn't finish till like 4 and I didn't get home till like 5-ish. So it felt like a whole day's gone by. And there's a lot of people, kind of know already. I've got, a newborn baby, which is not newborn anymore. She's now turning 9 months, but I'm very much
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. I'm very much family. I'm a family man, family mode. I just want to get home and be with my partner and my child because I got a day job, work Monday to Friday. So technically I'm working 6 days a week. So I didn't think I can commit to doing a full schedule. So, but luckily my partner came up with a great idea. She goes, if you can do a half day, then working Saturdays won't be as grueling. So now I get in for like 9:30 now, and it depends because we did an early show. We basically recorded around I want to say 11:45, and I was done by 1:45, and I got home about 1 something, like 1:45. Basically, that's the earliest I've been home for doing WrestleTalk. So they've been quite flexible and helpful in that regards. They changed a lot of things. They changed their filming schedule for Saturday just to accommodate me. So I just want to point that out.
You talked about them being accommodating and stuff, and obviously Tempest being your current co-host. When you
Mm.
found out, obviously, I assume you knew Tempest would most likely be your co-host when you started this, but what was your reaction to that?
So funny enough, this ties into the question about doing Saturdays. So when I got offered it, so initially Pete told me it would be probably a rotating cast of me, him, and Tempest. So it would be like LIW Saturdays sort of thing. You 1 week could get Tempest and Pete, next you get me and Pete, or me and Tempest, Tempest and Pete again, or whatever. So that's how initially it was sold to me, and I was like, okay, I can miss a few, a couple of Saturdays or so in a month, and then when Ollie made the offer for me to work more with WrestleTalk. They wanted me to do every Saturday, and I was like, yeah. And then after I found out Pete, it'll be me and Tempest. I was happy because I like Tempest. Tempest is one of the most knowledgeable guys. It makes me laugh. In real life, he's like 5, 6 years younger than me, but he's got all these great wrestling knowledge. He's very knowledgeable about wrestling. He's a great guy. And, I can't say enough great things about him. It was also a case of like, I'm synonymous with working with like SP3 and Alex McCarthy. Those are the two guys. When I work with them, it comes fluid, quite natural. So every time when I work with someone, I try to find chemistry with all my co-hosts. And then, Pete and Tempest have their way of presenting podcasts, their reviews. And mine's a bit different from them, right? As you can probably tell, I'm very much I'm more in terms of my critique of stuff is not as brutal as they can be.
Mm. So, how do you feel like that maybe adds to the podcast, or maybe takes away from it in some cases, with you having maybe a different way of reviewing?
I'm gonna give you like an honest response that no one's ever heard. That this is like a Tom Talks Rubbish exclusive. So when it comes to working with Pete, right? So Pete is weird. So Pete and Tempest are both known for being negative about their opinions. But when I work with Pete, I make Pete laugh, and I basically try and draw out a lighter side of my presenters because I don't want to be say, oh, this is the worst, this is terrible. That's not, I don't want to say that. If something is bad, I say, I see what they were going for, but the execution wasn't great. You know what I'm saying? It's more like a
Mm.
critique than a burial in a
Yeah, I know
way.
exactly what you mean.
So, and I like to have fun because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is people in spandex, in their, in their like leotard, kind of underwear looking outfits. I can't be too serious about that. For me, you know what I'm saying? I can't be that guy. I can't be like,
Mm.
this is like a performance art, sports kind of athletic Cirque du Soleil kind of thing. So I can't go, Arr! It's silly, even though the wrestlers are putting their lives on the line, but at the end of the day, it's larger than life. It's caricature, so I can't be too serious about it. I like to have fun, and then the hardest part. This is the part I'm gonna say. We did a show as a trio one time, and I did find it difficult because they both were on a diatribe about things they didn't like, and I wanted to keep it light. So it's kind of like it felt like a magnet when opposites attract. But then when you got two negative and one plus, I don't know. So for me, that was like the only time I felt like it was quite difficult in terms of flow. And then when it's a three man booth situation, it is you're trying to find your groove and your rhythm together.
Mm. So when it comes to the big question, you have to pick between working with Pete or Tempest. Which one do you pick?
Um, why do I have to pick one? I like both of them. If I get a chance to work both of them, but at the moment, I've got Tempest. I'm very much loyal to the person I'm working with. I don't like choose. Oh, I like this person better. Every person I work with will bring something different out of me.
Mm.
It's all about adapting because you can't be stuck in your ways too. Because I feel like if you're trying to find chemistry, you have to find ways where you guys can relate to each other and where you can bond. So I feel like with Pete, it was quicker in terms of our chemistry. It was there instantly. With Tempest, it took us more time to find a groove. But I feel like the last couple of shows we've been doing, especially when we're not calling ourselves House of the Black Mask, we find our groove and we're bantering and because Tempest's got a great sense of humor, so I'm tapping more into that with him. So yeah.
Okay, maybe that wasn't the right question. How do you feel like you brought it up, but I'll phrase the question differently. How do you feel like your chemistry is different with both co-hosts?
Yeah. No. It's a good question to ask, but my mom always taught me never choose a favorite child, love them equally. But the way you phrased it, because I don't want to give you a BS question like, oh, I like both. I do like working with both of them, but with Pete, it was instant fluid in terms of like because my style of hosting is kind of like I'm not comparing myself to Bobby the Brain Heenan, but I want to use this as an example. So, but did you watch wrestling during the time when Bobby Heenan was doing commentary
I
in?
didn't because I wasn't born, but I've seen
It
the
meant yeah,
stuff.
in terms of clips,
Yeah, I've
of
seen
course, yeah,
clips.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now, have you watched commentary Bobby Heenan did with Gorilla Monsoon and one he did with Tony Schiavone?
yeah. There's a difference.
Yeah. So the difference being a gorilla, he basically he reacts, he gives to what Bobby's doing in terms of his antics, while Tony kind of shut it down.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, so with Pete is like he instantly I was able to break him in terms of my humor and stuff like that, and get him laughing. Sometimes I derail the show with my humor. With Tempest was more diligent, and then eventually he loosened up to groove with me.
Mm. That's really cool. Who is you talked about there? Who is the presenter that you want to work with at WrestleTalk that maybe you haven't had the chance to work with yet?
Luke Owen, man, he's the head of podcasting at WrestleTalk. He's one of the people that's been so helpful in terms of getting me to the spot that I'm at, in terms of the hours that I'm doing and being so accommodating. Luke, because I finally worked with Ollie because we reviewed SmackDown together. He covered for Tempest where he was in Canada, so I finally got to work with Ollie, which was a big moment because I've always admired his work. So I was happy to work with him, and we had a great show, which had great feedback. Our energy, was on the same level. So Luke is someone I want to work with. Sullivan Bolt Brown, because everyone thinks is like we're like two dream personalities to work together. Definitely would like to work with him. Adam Blampier, you know, basically the entire team, because Laurie as well. Laurie is very much a very smart individual, and I love how he analyzes things. I would love to break down like Bray Wyatt and Uncle Howdy and other things with him. And Andy
Mm.
Datson's got a great dry sense of humor. So my sense of humor bouncing off Andy, I feel like that'd be great too. So basically,
They
the whole everyone. So basically, everyone in
that's
WrestleTalk.
that's fair, but I like that answer because you've given me reasons that you want to work with all of them. So I think that's very cool. Rather than you just being
Appreciate that.
like, I would rather not. Rather than you almost like shooting on someone and being like, I would rather not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and even Adam's a legend in the game. I would like to to work with him, and yeah, and then Luke. In terms of Luke, because Luke is very much steadfast in terms of how he does podcasting. So just to work with him and learn from him, because he's one of those people like Ollie. They've been doing it for a while. They're like generals when it comes to doing podcasting. So it's all about for me learning experience as well.
You talked about getting to work with Ollie at for a show. What is
Mm.
one thing that you learned from him immediately when you did a podcast with him?
Where did I learn immediately? Because I know him because I've spent time with him in real life too. What have I learned? I don't know. Um, I'm kind of stumped because he's very good at maintaining a topic. Because sometimes I like to jump along things. Like I even did it in the beginning of our interview in terms of I was going to mention something that probably might interfere with your lines of questioning. He's very good at maintaining a topic. He's very good at that. But besides that, I feel like over the last few years, I've grown. So when we worked together, I felt like I was able to hold my own.
You talked about growing there as a presenter. Do you look back on any of your stuff, whether it be Wrestling Daily, whether it be Monday Night Live, or just any of your previous work, and you're like, I would do this differently now, knowing what I know?
You know what? The only thing that was different back then and now is I'm more comfortable. I'm less nervous. Because when you care about something so much, you don't want to f up. Because I've been doing it for a while, and I feel like I've got a good grip on things. I feel like it's more about being comfortable, and that comes with doing reps. Unless you're someone that's out of the gate, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna be great at this. It takes time
Hmm.
to find your rhythm. Even now, the way I podcast now is completely different to how I was six months ago. Because I try to find a happy balance because my personality as well. Because sometimes people can't take you being too out there, too larger than life in your face. So I try to find a happy medium between that and also being analytical of certain things that I watch. Because I feel like people enjoy that as well in terms of breaking down a wrestling character's motivations and also their match too.
Hmm. I I fully agree with that again. So like when it comes to the way your fandom has changed since we last spoke, where are you at with your current wrestling fandom?
Oh man, I feel like it's a great time for wrestling in terms of if you're a wrestling fan of different styles, there's different styles for you. So if you're into like Japanese wrestling, and there's lucha libre in Mexico, and then in terms of mainstream wrestling, in terms of like WWE, AEW, I feel like there's a bit for everyone that enjoys different types of wrestling or all wrestling. My fandom is pretty much still the same. It's just weird. It's just basically I feel like there's so much wrestling that I can't watch all of them, so I have to be smart on what I pick. I mainly watch WWE and AEW, especially SmackDown because I review it. Raw, when if they have a good show across the board, I watch that as well. And AEW, they're the best wrestling weekly, so I tend to watch a lot of Dynamite and sometimes Rampage if I have time. But my fandom is still the same. When you talk about wrestling, the fandom kind of changes because it becomes a bit more serious because you're covering it and so forth.
Hmm. How do you watch, for example, say you had this Saturday at time of recording, you didn't have to do the SmackDown review. How do you watch a show differently when you would normally review it but you don't have to. Uh, how do you watch a show differently compared to when you're reviewing it and when you're not?
Good question. So if I'm not
That
reviewing
was
a show,
wordy. I do apologize.
no, but I get what you're trying to say. So basically, I will take my time watching it. That's the honest answer. Because if SmackDown was on it came on Fridays, on Saturday, depending on my time with my family, I'll probably potentially watch on a Sunday and then catch up on Rampage as well on a Sunday. But because I review it, I watch it on the day before we do the podcast. So same with Raw. Raw came on like what yesterday. Well, today's Tuesday, and I watch a bit of it at work and then finish off at home. How about these? Excuse me.
Gesundheit.
Thank you.
When it when I've got to ask you about your good brothers, Alex McCarthy and SP3. How do you feel like podcasting with them either led you to WrestleTalk or helped you with your work with WrestleTalk?
So, as you know, those are my brothers. I love them very much. In fact, after this interview, I got a phone call with Alex McCarthy coming up afterwards. Um,
Tell him I said, hey,
so
he's a good dude.
I, I'll tell him. He said, "Hey, he is a lovely dude. How he is on. He's a guy. I can't say enough good things about him. Him and SP3. With Alex, he's generous beyond like I can't like he would give his shirt off his back to you, man. He's very, very lovely. He's there for me. All the opportunities I've had going to wrestling to Wembley for WWE, I went with him. I was his guest. I went with him to watch the show, and when he did an interview, I took pictures to so I felt useful. But to answer your question, so I don't go on a tangent. Um, I learned a lot from both of them. With Alex McCarthy's more professionalism because he's such a great interviewer. Questions. I learned more about questions with Alex in terms of that. With SB3, he let me grow. Because when I was, because in the beginning, I was a bit probably like scared and rigid, and I didn't want to talk too much or be too silly. You're self-conscious. I was self-conscious in the beginning of how I'll come across. With
Mm.
SB3, he helped me like let loose and be who I really was. When we were doing those Monday shows together, that's when I discovered, what worked in terms of what got over with people and what they enjoyed. It was mostly just being me. But
Mm.
yeah, that's what's helped me with WrestleTalk.
What you talked about your good brothers there. Do you think you'd be in this position with WrestleTalk if you hadn't had that experience with Alex McCarthy and SP3?
So funnily enough, because I give him the credit, but also shout out to Ollie Davis because he's the one I initially sent my stuff to. He's the one who sent my stuff over to Alex. So it was a case of if Alex didn't take me on, they would have figured out another way to incorporate me
Mm. And
because yeah, because another important thing, you have your own content. So this is you hustling, man. You have your own content and everything like that. I didn't I did my own stuff, but I wasn't really talking about wrestling content. So I feel like a bit like those American football players or athletes that WWE just pluck out obscurity and put them in the PC. So I felt like that yeah, I feel like that was me because I didn't really have to grind as much. I knew someone, I knew Ollie, my friends Will Ospreay. I
Mm.
really, I mentioned that to you. He's my friend I've known since back in the backyard wrestling days. He, had a direct line to Ollie. I told him I wanted to get into WrestleTalk. He's the one that hooked me up.
Mm. That's really cool. That is a very cool story. And I love hearing that story every time we talk. So, speaking of every time we talk, because we've been going for about 25 minutes, and I do want to be respectful of your time about and letting you be a family man for the evening. Since you are a repeat
Funnily
guest,
enough, you said that because when this comes out, it's not going to be a thing. But I am, my family, they're gone for the week anyway. So I'm good, man.
fair enough. But I do want to be respectful of your time. As I say, since you are a repeat guest, I am curious to know where have I improved since we last spoke, and where can I still improve?
Well, I think there was never wrong with your delivery. You are very mindful of people. You're very respectful. You do research. You're very good at that. At this juncture, as we're talking, there's nothing I could tell you. Oh, you need to do this. You need to do that. You're doing well, mate.
I appreciate that. Again, you and I'll call you. I call you the Daily Boys, but you lot have always been incredibly nice to me.
No, mate, like I like your show because legit, for example, you interviewing someone like Tempest or Will Washington or Righteous Reg, their stories don't get told a lot unless they're doing a podcast episode and they mention their personal life in that episode. You don't really know a lot about wrestling content creators. So what you're doing is actually really great. I get to learn more about people that I admire and like by watching your interviews. So
I,
you've got a great niche idea, mate. You're doing really well.
I really appreciate that. But before we get too sappy, and as we look at sort of wrapping this up soon, where do you want to improve as a content creator as you go onto your journey in WrestleTalk?
An area I would like to improve in is basically interviews. That's something that I've not been particularly interested in doing. Because, for example, the times I've done wrestling interviews has been with SP3 and Alex McCarthy. I've never been interested in interviewing a wrestler by myself. I've always liked doing it with my brothers. I feel like the comfort of us three, rolling off together in terms of us asking questions. So I've never been comfortable in wanting to interview a wrestler by myself. I think that's an area I need to because it's never really appealed to me. Because if I wanted to, I could have been like, "Hey, Ollie, I want to interview this and that," and go through all the channels. Alex McCarthy is a great one. He usually gets emails of, this wrestler's available. Do you want to interview them? He very much helped in terms of establishing SB3 and in terms of him doing interviews. Now SB3 has his own contacts, how he does his own things, but Alex has been helpful in that regards. So in terms of one area that I haven't really explored much, and I feel like I'm probably lacking in terms of not being interested as much is interviewing wrestlers.
Who is on your bucket list for a wrestling interview? Put it out into the universe.
That's hard to say. That's what I'm trying to say because I have no desires to interview a wrestler unless for me it's always a like a work experience when I used to do it with Alex to see how he did it. Like I enjoyed my interview with the Inspiration, aka the Iconics. That's one of my favorite interviews that I did. And the other interview I did was me and SB3. We interviewed Miro together. But I like both times, and I did my research. I was really good in that, and both times it was cool, but I never really got the buzz to want to interview wrestlers. So it's quite hard in terms of who would I want to interview. I would have to think about that and get back to you probably at the end of this interview.
Fair enough. So we talked about wanting to improve. Obviously, Wrestle Talk has a lot of podcasts. What is one podcast you see currently and you're like, that looks fun. I'd love to be on that show. It
has to be Grap City, man. I love that podcast. Will Washington, Righteous Reg, Philip Lindsay, they are phenomenal because you get a bit of three friends, shooting the shit. And, they talk about pop culture stuff they like, and also with a side of wrestling. Their podcasts are like 3 hour film epics. It's like watching The Godfather,
but they
part
don't
one and
feel
part
like
two.
it.
You know what? The length of their podcast is great for my train commutes because I listen to them going to work and then coming home from work. So to listen to a whole Grapsody episode would take me 2 days.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
As I say, what about in Wrestle Talk specifically? Is there any podcast you're like, I'd love to have a chance on that show?
So at the moment, all the other podcasts on the moment is just basically reviewing other wrestling shows. There's not a particular niche show. It would just be a case of like, hey, if I did a Monday Night Raw review, I get to work with Luke. Hey, if I did an AEW one, potentially Luke or Ollie. You know what I'm saying? So it's more the the Blackpool Content Club. That's one. That's a niche one that they do where they get topical things and then Luke, Pete, and Tempest, or sometimes a rotating cast of people would sit down and chat about a wrestling topic.
Fair. So I can fully understand where you're coming with that. As we look at wrapping this up, you'll remember this segment from last time, but I'm curious to see if your answers have changed. We're going to do a segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my videos before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite wrestler's team, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler of all time. Basically questions that Sat might get asked on social media quite regularly. So now he'll have a place to be like, I've answered this please go watch this. So, has your favorite match from last time changed since we last spoke?
The thing is, it's quite hard. In terms of me having a favorite match, it's quite hard for me to nail down my favorite exactly. But the match that I love currently is Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. But I'm always partial to Will Ospreay match because he's been bringing it every time he's in the ring. Will is the best wrestler around. I like his match with Shingo Takagi. Those are
Mm,
incredible matches that he has. So anything involving Will Ospreay. I never have one definite answer, but if I'm always like pushed to answer, I'll be like, oh, just one of Osprey and Shingo matches.
there. What about your favorite pay per view?
My favorite pay-per-view again is All Out from now I want to say a couple of years ago, the one where Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson debuted. That was
2021?
yeah, I want to go with that. Yeah. Yeah. That was a phenomenal pay-per-view from top to bottom. That one.
Mm. I I hate saying I agree, but I always agree with my guest answers because they always have like really brilliant answers. What about your favorite wrestler's theme of all time?
Rest all the variations of the rock theme. Because they
Mhm.
all originate from the Nation of Domination. It's all offshoot of the Nation of Domination or the Nation's theme. So all the rocks, all the variation except for one, it sounded like Hypnotized by Biggie. I didn't really care for that. And there was another generic one that they got rid of. But all the ones that had the same kind of hook that sounded like from the Nation. And the tippy top favorite rock theme is the Hollywood theme, the one that he had at No Way Out 2003,
Mm.
that version. And even the version that we all know, but in terms of the intro and when he goes, if you smell and look at the tongue, look at the tongue, look at the tongue, la 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 la, what the Rock is cooking. I just love that when he comes out No Way Out 203 and beats the crap out of Hulk Hogan. Mwah.
Hmm. Another brilliant choice, in my humble opinion. Favorite tag team of all time.
Ooh, favorite tag team of all time. Um, Harlem Heat or Steiner Brothers. But if I had to pick one and you're forcing me, Harlem Heat, man. Harlem Heat, they did a lot for me in terms of black representation as a kid. So, Booker T and Stevie Ray just ass kickers. So for me, Harlem Heat is my favorite tag team, followed by the Steiner Brothers, because Steiner Brothers were incredible. Just beast in the ring. Like both two brothers, just so intense, and their suplexes and then the clotheslines and then just yeah, they just brought it out, man. Those are my team. Heart Foundation, that's another, answer in terms of number three and number four, the Rockers. And also, I like the Hardy Boys. Dudley Boys you get, a shout out to. The Eliminators in ECW, they were ahead of their time, but they don't really get talked about enough. And I also on that list, because I know you didn't say list, but I'm just thinking, I like
That's
Bulldog and
fine.
Owen. I like Bulldog and Owen as a tag team. So there's that. But yeah, number one's Harlem Heat.
That's brilliant. But out of every tag team you mentioned, we book a battle royal or a gauntlet match. Who do you put over?
Or a gauntlet or battle royal with all the tag teams I mentioned.
Yeah.
Who do I put over?
Mm.
Harlem Heat, man. It's either that or the Steiner Brothers. I will probably they all fall over and get a draw or something. I don't know.
Fair enough. And then who is your favorite wrestler of all time?
The Rock. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, from the promos, his in-ring work, especially in 2001, he became an even better wrestler in 2001 when he came back, when he was kind of like leaner and, he was in fantastic shape after doing the Scorpion King. He became a different type of wrestler. The Rock has been my guy, man. The promos, the music, the charisma, he had the it factor, the catchphrases. It's just any guy that wants to be a promo guy as a wrestler, you study The Rock because the way he carried himself, he had this aura about him. His aura kind of reminded you of how Muhammad Ali was able to trance people when he was doing, boxing.
I've never heard it put that way, but I've got to stop saying I agree, but I fully can understand what you're saying there. But
I appreciate
as
that.
as we wrap this up, Sat, obviously I want to say thank you for coming on. But those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this. A question that I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. We're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very weird way. So, what is a piece of content from your time at WrestleTalk so far that you want to live forever, and one that you don't?
Um, my first Wrestling Daily episode, man. It was my first ever show. I wore a makeshift toga because I was basically doing JR when he wore a toga for WrestleMania 9
Mm.
1983. So I wore my toga. So that's like precious because that was my first episode. It wasn't my best episode, but that was my first one. And also the interviews that me and Alex did with the inspiration. That's great. I want that to live forever. One that I don't want to live forever. Um, that's quite hard because I've had podcast episodes where I felt like I didn't come across really well. It might be one of the news. I don't know, maybe one of the news where I didn't have enough time reading that, it came out quite whatever. I mean, I appreciate you want to wrap up, but I thought you were going to ask me questions about the news and stuff like that because there's so much I can tell you about that.
As I say, I want to be respectful of your time. And I think we have some decent content in the can. Do you know what I mean?
Awesome. Hey, man, it's your show. I ain't got to direct your show. I ain't got to tell you what to do.
Nah. But as we wrap this up, Sat, where can the good people find you and all your content?
Well, if you want to follow me with consent, at sat next to on Twitter. That's why I am. Some of you guys have been sneaky because some of you guys go on my link tree and you know where to find me on Instagram. That's what people have been doing because I get people following me. I'm like, And then sometimes Tempest will post something on Instagram and people find me. It's my personal Instagram, so I don't really promote it as much. But if people follow me, what the heck,
Mm.
it is what it is. But in terms of my main one, where if you want to find my takes or anything wrestling related or as close to, it's Twitter. So I talk about wrestling on that, and also like I enjoy films and TV shows and music. Occasionally, I'll mention that as well. So yeah, everything that I like, I usually spout it on Twitter.
It's well worth doing, guys. It's one of my favorite content creators and one of the nicest humans that I've ever had the chance to interview. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next one. A goodbye now.